Hey, YouTubies, I want to talk about connections now between Edgar Cayce and my Cronide research. For those of you that don't know, Edgar Cayce is a very famous American mystic, prophet, psychic, whatever you want to call him. He's called the sleeping prophet because he would go into a sleep trance to give readings, and they recorded everything he did, and there is a society kept going by his children and their descendants. I believe it's out in Virginia. It's called the Association for Research and Enlightenment. And he was into a lot of holistic healing, herbal healing, and he helped a lot of people, but he ended up dying right before World War II was over. But I used to study him quite a bit in the 1990s and late or early 2000s. And what always fascinated me about Edgar was his small amount of information regarding Atlantis. Now, he claims that there were three destructions of Atlantis. One was about 50,000 years ago. And at that time, they were trying to get rid of these dinosaurs and dangerous animals and using technology to do it. And at that time, the poles shifted and caused the first cataclysm and a volcanic eruption on Atlantis. But they were able to get rid of many of the animals that way that were harming humans or posing threats to humans. The second destruction came around 25 to 28,000 years ago because they were, again, continuing to abuse technology, and it split the island into three separate islands. And the last destruction of Atlantis was about 12,000 years ago when it finally sank below the water. Now, my Cronide research fits in with this, and I'm going to tell you why. As you know, I found the timeline in a book out of the Loeb Library from Diodorus Siculus that states that this timeline for the Cronides is anywhere between 12,000 to 25,000 years ago. I place it around 15 to 19,000 years ago. That puts my Cronides in a timeline after the second destruction of Atlantis, if Edgar Cayce is correct on his information. And it would put my Cronides existing at a time not far from the final destruction of Atlantis. Now, what I've always found interesting in my research is that these Cronides are always mentioned as tall, Caucasoid, but human and mammalian, even though they used a lot of reptilian symbolism. They used a lot of snake symbolism and dragon symbolism. But these Cronides were human. The women breastfed. They were described as having hair and beards and blue eyes and golden hair, red hair, auburn hair. But they were incredibly smart, like a scientist. And what's always intrigued me in my research is these Cronides would have certain kind of objects that gave them knowledge or were used as weapons, and always talked about them flying up into the sky with their crafts, possibly. They're even shown in some of these ancient pictures, like the Behestan inscription, in a plane or a ship flying up in the sky. So, as I said, there were certain objects, such as the demise, that ended up getting taken from this ancient queen that was murdered, passed down, and eventually found their hands into what the Sumerian Enki, who's equivalent to Zeus, who ended up giving it to his daughter Inanna, who would be Aphrodite. And she took these demise in what they call a bow to heaven to her city complex in ancient Babylon, which would be Sumer, and she gave it to her priests, and they were able to build a civilization by using these devices that had knowledge. And, I thought, could this have been something just written, or was it a computer? And then there was something called a Tablet of Destiny that the ancient Sumerian queen gave to her son Kingu, whom Anu took. And, took it after he murdered Kingu. And it had power. It was coveted. In fact, at one point it was stolen by this zoo bird, and they retrieved it. But it eventually found its way into El's hands, and that would be Cronus's. And then where it went, who knows? But it was something they wore around their neck, and it had great power, and whoever had it had control of everything, and was looked upon as the leader. Now, I don't know if it was some kind of controlling device for some kind of computer or what, but it was coveted. And as I said, there was the mention of them always flying up in something, some kind of a craft. And then there are just the fact that they had all of this star knowledge when the average person didn't. And that's what they were teaching. And they were teaching how the earth moved and what the pattern was of the zodiac. In fact, that was considered dangerous knowledge to give, forbidden to the average human. They didn't want him to know how things worked. So now, putting that together with what Edgar Cayce is saying, that this advanced civilization had to create colonies, I'm starting to think that these Cronides were scientists and survivors out of the second destruction of Atlantis, creating a new colony in ancient Tyre and in that area. And there were people there already, but they came in and took a position of power. And with these objects they had, and keeping this knowledge within their bloodline, they ruled. And Zeus is always associated with the flood, which is before or right at the time that would probably be the final destruction of Atlantis. And that would make sense, that they had to start all over, and they were creating a colony. So I would then put all this together. Now, like I said, Cayce was a psychic, so how reliable is his information versus some of the written works of these ancient scholars out of the Library of Harvard? Well, time will tell, because he said there's 3 libraries, and one of them is under the Sphinx, that have yet to be found. And if those are ever found and they don't rip them up and hide them, it may prove him 100% correct. Now, let me read something that he wrote that's going to blow your mind even more, because it just did that for me this morning when I thought about it. In a book written by, I think this is his son, Hugh Lynn Cayce, who wrote a book about Edgar Cayce on Atlantis, where his son, Edgar Cayce's son, tried to pick out everything that Edgar Cayce said about Atlantis. He writes, "The earth was inhabited by animals long before it was inhabited by men." And this is Atlantis before 50,000 years ago, 50,000 BC. It's about 52,000. It says, "In the land now known as Utah or Nevada, when the first peoples were separated into groups as families, the entity developed much and gave much to his people who were to succeed in that land. And in the ruins, as are found in the mounds and caves in the northwestern portion of New Mexico, may be seen some of the drawings the entity then made some 10 million years ago." Reading 2665-2, July 17th, 1925. And this is page 48 of the book I'm looking at. Okay, what did he just say? He said the lands of Utah and Nevada and New Mexico were occupied before the sinking of Atlantis. And if you continue in this book, he'll tell you that humans came into this planet in 5 different races 10.5 million years ago. The Lord, it says, the period in the world's existence from the present time being 10.5 million years ago, when man came into the earth plane as the Lord of that in the sphere. Man appeared in 5 places, then at once. The 5 senses, the 5 reasons, the 5 spheres, the 5 developments, the 5 nations. Okay, I'm going to stop. And he talked about 133 million people at that time coming in. And he gives certain areas of the earth that haven't changed through all of these catastrophes. He talks about the Sahara, Tibet, Mongolia, Caucasian regions, and this area that I just talked about, Utah, Nevada, New Mexico. He says humans were in those areas, ancient humans. Utah, Nevada, and New Mexico. And what is my area that I'm looking at? Lovelock Cave in Nevada. And I have seen pictures of skulls found with occipital buns, a skull found with an occipital bun, published out of a university press out of Utah. I've talked about that in my research. An occipital bun is particular to the Neanderthal species found in Europe. And there is no explanation. And there is nowhere to be found where this skull is. Who knows where it is, but they have pictures of it. In the 1960s, somebody was studying it after it was found near Lovelock Cave. So, fascinating. Utah, Nevada, and New Mexico are supposed to be some of the oldest areas that were occupied by humanoids or humans, hominids, per Edgar Cayce. And that there's evidence, and they were developing things there. Now, think, what is going on in those areas today? Well, your Area 51, your Roswells, your deep underground bases by the military. They're all out there. So are they really creating things that are brand new? Or are they rediscovering things that were in ancient underground bases to begin with and just re-engineering it? Because these ancient people were said to be technologically advanced and had many flying machines. So here we go. What is under that ground that they are after or have reclaimed, and then come up with this reptilian alien story as a cover, rather than tell you the truth that humans have been walking around on this planet and had advanced civilizations over 50,000 years ago and fiddled with the environment twice and destroyed it completely twice, and have had to recolonize and start over twice, at least. What a cover-up. And on top of it, this handful of military, or it's probably some private organization, and finding its way over to certain parts of the Middle East. We all know what I'm talking about there. And it's all under wraps. It's all controlled, and they won't let you know what's there because they don't want you to have it. And they don't want you to know that this planet has been ripped up twice before, and all we are the remnants of the survivors that had to start over. And their God of their Abrahamic religions was a scientist. So was his family, who brought remnants of some technology with them when they had to create new colonies, and then moved into positions of power in creating these royal houses. And they kept this knowledge and whatever small items of technology they had to themselves, and kept everybody in ignorance and told you it was forbidden knowledge and fallen angels and all of that. So I'm going to be looking into this quite heavily. I'm going back over all of my work, and I want to put something together looking at this possible connection. And it will take me, months to do this. I'm working on it. I'm rereading all of my books. I'm trying to put the most significant quotes together and looking at these connections. But I want you to think about this, because this kind of blew my mind this morning when I reread this, because I had looked at this years ago, and thinking that Nevada, Utah, New Mexico were some of the oldest lands, wondering, and that there's evidence and things left over, but yet that's where all our military people are at. Isn't that interesting? They're all underground there. So there has to have been something underground already, and they just rediscovered it and are keeping it to themselves. I also know that there's something going on up in Wisconsin. I think they have a lot of underground bases there, particularly near these forest preserves. There's something going on there. There's a lot of strange underground noises that people were hearing a few years back. So something's going on over there as well. I don't know if they found something or they're just digging in because they know something's coming. But this is interesting. So I just connected this today. And like I said, psychics and channeling has its limits. But the fact that Cayce said there's 3 libraries to back up what he was saying is the most intriguing thing to me, and sheds possibility that what he said was correct. And it seems to fit in with some of my research, and it explains some of these bizarre and strange objects of knowledge and power that these ancient gods and goddesses had. Okay, that's it. Thank you.